Making the grade evening, 8th of January 2015. Now for this session I want to focus on the listening exam. Even though it's only 20% of the overall grade, a lot of students only get about 50% in this exam. That essentially loses you 10% of the overall GCSE and has the power to bring you down a whole grade. We often find that a lot of students who are aiming for an A star will get an A, and likewise those who are aiming for a C will get a D because they underperformed the listening exam. The listening exam is comprised of a range of questions. First up are multiple choice questions. These can appear throughout the paper. They consist of 4 options, and candidates just have to circle or underline the correct answer. Next up are short answer questions. These range from 1 to 3 marks. You don't need to use full sentences here. These questions often require just bullet points or one-word answers. For example, a 1-mark question might just ask you, what is the tempo of this extract? There is no need to put it into a full sentence. You can just write andante or fast or slow. One word will get you that mark. Don't waste time writing a full sentence when you could be concentrating on another question. Long answer questions I'm going to come back to in a second. It's going to be one of the focuses of this session. But these are high tariff questions, often around about 8 marks, sometimes 10, and these are also marked for spelling and grammar. You can't get full marks for this question without getting good spelling and grammar. There's always one question here which will have a skeleton score, and you'll have to follow the music and fill in missing music. And this is the other high tariff question which I'll come onto in a second. And lastly, there will be a table where students will have to compare or maybe contrast 2 pieces and highlight similarities and differences between them. Overall, I think the first golden rule is to make sure you read the question carefully. It's really important that you don't go off on a tangent and start talking about something which is irrelevant to this question. So for example, if a question asks you to talk about melody, only talk about melody. Talk about the shape, talk about what scale it uses. Don't start talking about whether it's fast or slow or if it's high pitched, because that is not talking about melody. You are talking about tempo and pitch at that point. Even if those statements are correct, you will not get a mark for it because the question has asked you to talk about a specific thing. And in this case, we're talking about melody. Make sure you answer all the questions. It seems like a really obvious thing to say, but students often leave questions blank, particularly when they're focusing on other parts of the question. If you get to the end of a question and the CD is about to move on, just guess it. You've got a 25% chance in multiple choice questions getting it right, and if it's a 1-mark question, all you need to do is write down a word. Just give it a guess. You never know, you might be right. And finally, look at the points that are available for each question. So for example, if you've got a 5-mark question, you'll be expected to make 5 points. In that 5-mark question, if you don't give 5 points, maybe you give 3, the maximum you can get is 3. So, the notation question. I talked about this briefly at the start. Here's an example. Students in Year 11 will recognise this one. This was from your mock. There are 2 types of this notation question, and 2 types of answers. This is the first type of answer. There will always be a clue in the question, and look around the rest of the score. In this case, we've got lots of scales. This tells us the answer will also be a scale. So what you then need to look out for is where that scale goes. It might go up or might go down. Some students find it's helpful just to write the shape. In this case, it went up slightly and went down. There's no reason why you can't write underneath it. And then write the notes in on the above stave. in a scale. The answer will not be notes jumping about all over the place. It's unreasonable for you for them to expect you to give an answer of that sort. It will either be a scale or a copy and paste job, which I'll explain in a second. So this question has lots of scales in. Say for example, you've worked out that it's a descending scale, therefore it's going down. So you would write in notes which go down on the stave. Don't get too hung up about getting the correct pictures. If this, say for example, this is an 8-mark question, in this case it was an 8-mark question, you can still get up to 7 marks just for getting the correct shape. So say for example you put all the notes in, going in descending scale, did it correctly, but you were 2 notes out. So you started on an E when you should have started on an F. I don't know. If you did that, you won't lose many marks. You'll lose 1. You can still get 7 marks out of the 8. Here was the answer for this question. There's the shape. I drew the shape underneath, and there it is. It went up 1, and then there's the downward scale. And the clues were all round the score here. The other type of question you might get is where you've got a rhythm that is similar or identical somewhere else in the score. So even though we've got some scales here, the thing to look out for is, can I see this rhythm elsewhere? And there it is. It's here. Now if you've got a similar rhythm or identical rhythm in a bar that's right next to the bar you're going to put your answer in, chances are it's going to be the same pattern but up or down a note or 2. If, for example, you found this rhythm over here, or maybe over here, it could even be a simple copy and paste job. So you just copy the notes from wherever else in the score into the bar that you're answering. But in this case, because the bar is right next to its twin, I suppose, you just find out whether it's the same pattern but up a scale or down a scale, and then input your answer, making sure you follow this pattern. So I would, in this case, it starts on an E, so I would do E and go up a note because this one goes up a note, and go up again because this one goes up, and then carry on following the same shape. And there's the answer. So there it was, starting on E. This is identical shape to this bar here. And again, if you don't work out what pitch it is, it's not the end of the world. Get the right shape and you will get the majority of the marks. So there we have it. We've got 2 types of answer there, and those are the answers you will have to choose from in 99% of the papers. It's either going to be a scale, and there'll be clues in the score. So let's go back to this one. The clues were elsewhere in the score. There's a scale there. Here's a scale here. Or you'll have an identical rhythm somewhere else in the score, and the answer is an identical rhythm, just up or down pitch. So the other high tariff question is the long answer question. Now this one is worth 8 marks. Again, you'll recognise this from your mock. It asks you to describe how the music describes hens and chickens. And it asks you to refer to things like instrumentation, rhythm, melody, texture. So it's already given you a shopping list of things to listen out for. Now, there is a blank page next to the answer box for this question. Use it. Listen to it once or twice without writing anything down, and on that other blank page, make a list of all the things you hear. And then start to construct your answer. What you mustn't do, though, is do this. Give a shopping list of answers. There are 8 points here. This was an 8 mark question, so I've made 8 points. These are all correct. The piece of music had fast notes, it was in a major key, it was staccato, and so on. But it only gets 3 marks because it does not make reference to the context here. You must talk about whatever the piece is trying to describe. In this case, it was hens and chickens. Now, you don't need to be an expert about hens and chickens to get this correct. You just need to make general statements. And I would advise structuring the answers in this way. Every sentence you write, the first half will be about the music, and the second half will be about the context. So let's take one of our answers. We were talking about fast notes, or this might, tricky speaking, that's a short duration notes. The first part of a sentence might look something like this. The piece of music contains fast notes. Short duration is the slightly more complex version. Then stick in a comma. And then for the second half of your sentence, write something about the context. In this case, I've written, this could represent the quick movements of the animals. So I've talked about the music and what I've heard, and then I've referred back to the context, which is what the question has told me the piece is describing. And I've just made a general statement out. I don't know much about chickens and hens, but I know that they're fairly small and they move quite quickly. So in this case, I've referred back to this by adding a bit of context. Do that 8 times, you'll get yourself 8 marks. So here's an example, sort of model answer. I'll leave this up at the end. Just pause the video and you can have a quick read of it. But this gains 8 marks. It's not perfect in terms of its spelling and grammar, but it's good enough for a GCSE standard. And here we are. If we have a quick look, there's our sentence in there with its comma, and then the second half of the sentence. There's one here. Flutes and oboes are used heavily in this piece, and their ability to play a combination of legato and staccato melodies makes them suited to representing birds. I didn't put a comma in there, but still, the second half of this sentence refers back to the context of the piece. One thing, lastly, I need to make sure I get across to you is that you don't repeat answers. A lot of the mock exam ones I was marking this year, you referred to something, you got it right, you got the mark for it, but then you referred again later on in the question. So with that shopping list that you create on a blank page, once you've spoken about something, tick it off and don't talk about it again, because you will not get a second mark for it if you mention it twice. You can only get 1 mark for each point you make. So if you've spoken about dynamics, don't talk about dynamics again, because you won't get another mark for it. So there we are. The 2 Hightower questions, both of these questions were worth 8 marks in the mock exam. That's 16 out of 100, 16%. Getting those right will tip you a grade and a half either way. Get it wrong, it will bring you down a grade and a half. So I hope that's been useful for you. Please come and see Mr. Mitchell or Mr. Kearsey if you've got any more questions about this, and I'm happy to go through this paper with you again.